Hi everyone and welcome back to a WomenIN podcast. Today we are very lucky to be hearing from the CEO of the Supreme Court, Vicky Fox. And would you just like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi Faye, thanks for inviting me. I'm Vicky Fox. As you said, I am the Chief Executive Officer of the UK Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is the highest court in the UK and it hears cases that are of public importance for the whole country, for England and Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland. And I've been here 2.5 years. And prior to that, I've done a number of different jobs. I started life as a government lawyer. Then I switched careers and I've had some really interesting jobs in the Electoral Commission and also the independent in IPSA, which regulates MPs paying expenses.
And could you tell us a bit about sort of the jobs you do at the moment at the Supreme Court?
Well, one of the things I love about this job is the variety. We're a pretty small organisation and part of my role is to make sure that we run effectively and smoothly so that we offer people who are coming to the court a really excellent service. By the time their case gets to us, they've been involved in the courts for a long time, and it's important that they get a resolution, that they're respectfully treated, and their case proceeds in good time. We also do a lot of education and outreach work to raise awareness of what the court does and why it matters. And we have a constitutional role in upholding the rule of law and acting as an independent court. So there's the hearing the cases, there's education outreach. We do a lot of international work where we build relationships with courts around the world. We have many visitors that come to the court and we do exchanges with other courts, and that's to help maintain the UK's reputation as one of the leading legal communities where you would bring a case for resolution. And finally, the Supreme Court also sits as the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council, so we are the court of final appeal for UK overseas territories such as the Cayman Islands, but also for some Commonwealth countries that choose to have us as their court of final appeal.
So in that case, would they have to choose rather than would it be their choice?
Yes, so Commonwealth countries can choose whether or not to retain the Privy Council as their final court of appeal, or they may choose to have their own court. Yeah.
And can you tell us a bit about how you got to where you are today, a bit of your journey?
Well, it certainly wasn't planned. I've had a sort of winding career that I never dreamed for a second that this is where I would end up. As I mentioned before, I started life as a government lawyer and I had a really satisfying career as a lawyer in government for just over 15 years. I drafted secondary legislation, I advised policy colleagues on their areas of work, and then there came a point where I decided that I didn't want to be a lawyer anymore. And that was when I moved to the Electoral Commission and I became their head of advice and guidance. And that was a fantastically interesting role. And that was essentially translating legislation so that people could follow the rules around election finance and party political finance. And there I got to be involved in the 2015 general election, the Scottish independence referendum, the EU referendum, and it was a really fascinating time to be there. And then I moved to IPSA, where I was their Director of Regulation Insight, and that was working with MPs, working out their salaries and helping regulate and manage their expenses. And finally, and then this job came up and I thought this would be a great job, and here I am.
That's a really amazing career path. So you said it was not sort of a straight career path, so I assume it's not something you always wanted to do. I assume you wanted to start off by being a lawyer, as that's what you studied. So I'm sort of answering this as I ask it, but was this a career path you've always wanted, or is it really sort of just what's come along?
I didn't plan my career to end up here. I think that I always knew I wanted to work in public service. I'm very values driven, so I needed to work somewhere that aligned with my values, which are, about making a difference. I've always looked for work that is intellectually interesting and where there are kind of challenges that are complex and interesting to resolve. And I very much like working as part of a team. So sort of one of the rules that I always set myself when I was looking for next jobs was, does it align with my values, and do I feel excited about the prospect of doing it? You spend a lot of time at work, so for me it's really important that the work is interesting and stimulating. It was more that has guided my career than sort of climbing a vertical career ladder. And that's not for everyone, but that has worked for me, and that's led me to unexpected places, and I'm really pleased about that, actually. And there is an element of planning that's needed for a successful career, but I think you have to be careful not to overplan.
I think that's a really good piece of advice already, not to think too much about where you want to be in 10, 15 years time, and just to sort of take each step at a time. So I want to ask you, as this sort of whole campaign is about women and women in their roles, and you're obviously being a very senior woman in your job, has, not only in this job but in your entire career, has being a woman impacted you for the good or the bad? And what has sort of your experiences around being a woman been in your career?
I think it's had both positive and negative impacts in my career. Certainly when I started working, which is 30 years ago, there was a lot more sexism around, and I certainly encountered examples of being treated differently because I was a woman, and in ways that I wouldn't really expect to see nowadays. For example, quite early on in my career as a lawyer, you couldn't get promoted unless you did a certain type of work, but you couldn't do a certain type of work if you worked part-time. And so it was a sort of self-fulfilling prophecy of failure for women that chose to work part-time, and there were women, including myself, that chose to work part-time because we were mothers. And that was immensely frustrating. But I think there has been steady improvement throughout, and I certainly wouldn't be doing this job had I not had some of those early experiences that, although they shouldn't have happened and they were unwelcome, they have made me more thoughtful about my career and more imaginative. I think had I not encountered barriers along the way, I might have gone for a more vertical career ladder. But I think facing those obstacles and also becoming a parent and working different patterns, over a number of work patterns over a number of years, has made me think more deeply about how do I get satisfaction from my career. And I very much see my role now as a senior leader in the public sector to make sure that where I spot obstacles, whether they be for women or people from minority ethnic groups or any other group really, part of my responsibility as a senior leader is to get rid of those barriers and to speak up where somebody newer in their career might not feel empowered to do.
I think that's so important, especially young women hearing this, knowing that there's someone there that will sort of speak about having equal rights for women, whatever stage they are in their career. So thank you for that, and it's very, very important. And I think you touched on there about obviously things have changed now, and I think a big part of that is with COVID and a lot of things now being online, and more organisations do work from home, and there is more of that options now. So I think we have come a long way as a society in a short period of time as well. So finally, I just want to ask, what advice would you give university students who are just beginning their careers? They're obviously just at university now and might know what they want to do or not know what they want to do. What advice would you give them?
Well, I would say don't worry too much if you don't know what you want to do long term. I think, when you start, and particularly in your 20s, trying out a variety of jobs can be really valuable, because you start to identify, you know, what you enjoy, what you don't enjoy, what you feel passionately about. I guess there are a number of pieces of advice that I would give that certainly I found useful for my career. Is firstly to work out what matters to you, what your values are, what motivates you. If you know yourself, you're far more likely to be able to find a job that matches who you are as a person. And don't be afraid of defining success for yourself. You don't have to follow any traditional career paths or expected career routes. You know, work out what motivates and drives you. I think that's really important. I think also early on in your career, you may not get everything you want from that job, but you can supplement it by volunteering. And I mean volunteering within your organisation where you're doing your paid work, but also outside your organisation. A huge number of my leadership skills, which I use every day now, came from volunteering in the Jewish community, from my own days at UJS, from work I've done with my synagogue community. All of that voluntary work, not only are you giving back to your community and contributing to society, but actually you're building skills and experience yourself. So that's always I always think that should be something that's built into your career throughout your working life. I mentioned before, plan, but don't plan too much. Be open to unexpected turns and twists in your career. And I think be open about your ambitions, and particularly for women, it is okay to be ambitious and to say that you're ambitious and to ask for help from people more senior in the organisation. If you want to get a promotion or you want to move up, ask them for help, ask them how you should equip yourself so that you're ready for that step up. And in addition to having those sort of mentors within work, make sure you've got a good peer network. There's nothing like talking to people who are at a similar stage in life to you and having that support group around you. And I guess my final piece of advice is, dream big and just go for it. Don't hold yourself back. Just be brave and enjoy your career. You spend a lot of time doing it, and it's much more rewarding if you're enjoying what you're doing.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today and giving your amazing advice. I've definitely really enjoyed hearing you, and I'm sure everyone listening will as well. So thank you so much. We really have appreciated it.